اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
Inshallah, before we begin, if we offer a Surah Al-Fatiha for all of the Shuhada, all of our Muraja al-Kiram, all of the community members from here and our family members who have passed away, and all of the Marhameen from across the world. Al-Fatiha. For the Shafa'ah of Sister Alia, shall we begin with the recitation of Amman Yujib together, inshallah. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Amman yujibu al-mubtarra idha da'a yakshifu as-su'. أمن يجيب المضطر إذا دعا يكشف السوء. أمن يجيب المضطر إذا دعا يكشف السوء. أمن يجيب المضطر إذا دعا يكشف السوء. أمن يجيب المضطر إذا دعا ويكشف السوء. أفرح من صلى على محمد وآل محمد. As mentioned previously with the Due-E-Kumayl, it's an opportunity that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has gifted us yet again on this Thursday night to try and correct our mistakes, to try and put our hands up to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and admit our shortcomings, so that inshallah, if tomorrow is the day where our awaited Saviour, Al-Qa'im min Ali Muhammad Ajal Allah ta'ala Faraj al-Sharif, is to return, He can see us in our purest state, and inshallah, that could make us eligible to join Him in the revolution, in the Thawra, under the banner of Lifarat al-Hussain. So try, connect, and connect with the dua and disconnect from the world. Try and introspect between every beautiful line that Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam has carved together, and to inshallah begin and to warm your souls. Aflaha man salla ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم إني أسألك برحمتك التي وسعت كل شيء، وبقوتك التي قهرت بها كل شيء، وخضع لها كل شيء، وذل لها كل شيء، وبجبروتك التي غلبت بها كل شيء، وبعزتك التي لا يقوم لها شيء، وبعظمتك التي ملأت كل شيء، وبسلطانك الذي على كل شيء، وبنور وجهك الباقي بعد فناء كل شيء، وبأسمائك التي ملأت أركان كل شيء، وبعلمك الذي أحاط بكل شيء، وبنور وجهك الذي أضاء له كل شيء. يا نور يا قدوس يا أول الأولين ويا آخر الآخرين، اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تهتك العسام، اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تنزل النقام، اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تغير النعام، اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تحبس الدعاء، اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تقطع الرجاء، اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تنزل البلاء، اللهم اغفر لي كل ذنب أذنبته وكل خطيئة أخطأتها، اللهم إني أتقرب إليك بذكرك، وأستشفع بك إلى نفسك، وأسألك بجودك أن تدنيني من قربك، وأن توزعني شكرك، وأن تلهمني ذكرك. اللهم إني أسألك أسألك سؤال خاضع متذلل خاشع أن تسامحني وترحمني وتجعلني بقسمك راضيا قانعا. اللهم إني أسألك سؤال خاضع متذلل خاشع أن تسامحني وترحمني وتجعلني بقسمك راضيا قانعا وفي جميع الأحوال متواضعا. اللهم وأسألك سؤال من اشتدت فاقته وأنزل بك عند الشدائد حاجته وعظم فيما عندك رغبته. اللهم أعظم سلطانك وعلى مكانك وخفي مكرك وظهر أمرك وغلب قهرك وجرت قدرتك ولا يمكن الفرار من حكومتك. اللهم لا أجد لذنوب غافرا ولا لقبائحي ساترا ولا لشيء من عملي القبيح بالحسن مبدلا غيرك. لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك وبحمدك ظلمت نفسي وتجرأت بجهلي وسكنت إلى قديم ذكرك لي ومنك علي. اللهم مولاي كم من قبيح سترته وكم من فاتح من البلاء قمته وكم من عثار وقيته وكم من مكروه دفعته وكم من ثناء جميل لست أهلا له نشرته. اللهم عظم بلاي وأفرط بي سوء حالي وقصرت بي أعمالي وكعدت بي أغلالي وحبسني عن نفعي بعد آمالي وخدعتني الدنيا بضرورها ونفسي بجنايتها وطالي. يا سيدي فأسألك بعزتك ألا يحجب عنك دعائي سوء عملي وفعالي ولا تفضحني بخفي ما اطلعت عليه من سري ولا تعاجلني بالعقوبة على ما عملته في خلواتي من سوء فعلي وإساءتي ودوام تفريطي وجهالتي وكثرتي شهواتي وغفلتي، وكن اللهم بعزتك لي في كل الأحوال رؤوفا، وعلي في جميع الأمور عطوفا. إلهي وربي من لي غيرك، أسأله كشف ضري والنذر في أمري. إلهي ومولاي، أجريت علي حكما اتبعت فيه هوى نفسي، ولم أحترس فيه من تزيين عدوي، فغرني بما أهوى وأسعده على ذلك القضاء، فتجاوزت بما جرى علي من ذلك بعض حدودك، وخالفت بعض أوامرك، فلك الحجة علي في جميع ذلك، ولا حجة لي فيما جرى علي فيه قضاك، وألزمني حكمك وبلاؤك، وقد أتيتك يا إلهي بعد تقصيري وإسرافي على نفسي، معتذرا نادما منكسرا مستقيلا مستغفرا منيبا مقرا مذعنا معترفا، لا أجد مفرا مما كان مني، ولا مفزعا نتوجه إليه في أمري غير قبولك عذري وإدخالك إياي في سعة من رحمتك. اللهم فاقبل عذري وارحم شدة ضري، وفكني من شدي وفاقي. يا رب ارحم ضعف بدني ورقة جلدي ودقة عظمي، يا من بدأ خلقي وذكري وتربيتي وبري وتغذيتي. هبني لابتداء كرمك وسالف برك بي يا إلهي وسيدي وربي. أتراك معذبي بنارك بعد توحيدك، وبعد من طوى عليه قلبي من معرفتك، ولهج بي لساني من ذكرك، واعتقده ضميري من حبك، وبعد صدق اعترافي ودعائي خاضعا لربوبيتك، هيهات أنت أكرم من أن تضيع مرا بيتا، أو تبعد من أدنيت، أو تشرد من آويت، أو تسلم إلى البلاء من كفيته ورحمته. وليت شعري يا سيدي وإلهي ومولاي، أتسلط النار على وجوه خرت لعظمتك ساجدة، وعلى ألسن نطقت بتوحيدك صادقة وبشكرك مادحة، وعلى قلوب اعترفت بإلهيتك محققة، وعلى ضمائر حوت من العلم بك حتى صارت خاشعة، وعلى جوارح سعت إلى أوطان تعبدك طائعة، وأشارت باستغفارك مبينا ما هكذا الظن بك، ولا أخبرنا بفضلك عنك يا كريم يا ربي، وأنت تعلم ضعفي عن قليل من بلاء الدنيا وعقوباتها، وما يجري فيها من المكاره على أهلها، على أن ذلك بلاء ومكروه قليل مكفوه يسير بقاؤه قصير مدته، فكيف احتمال لبلاء الآخرة وجليل الوقوع المكاره فيها، وهو بلاء تطول مدته ويدوم مقامه، ولا يخفف عن أهله، لأنه لا يكون إلا عن غضبك وانتقامك وسخطك، وهذا ما لا تقوم له السماوات والأرض. يا سيدي فكيف بي وأنا عبدك الضعيف الذليل الحقير المسكين المستكين، يا إلهي وربي وسيدي ومولاي، لأي الأمور إليك أشكو، ولما منها أفج وأبكي، لأليم العذاب وشدته أم لطول البلاء ومدته، فلئن صيرتني للعقوبات مع أعدائك وجمعت بيني وبين أهل بلائك وفرقت بيني وبين أحبائك وأوليائك، فهبني يا إلهي وسيدي ومولاي وربي، صبرت على عذابك فكيف أصبر على فراقك، وهبني صبرت على حر نارك فكيف أصبر عن النظر إلى كرامتك، أم كيف أسكن في النار ورجاء عفوك، فبعزتك يا سيدي ومولاي أقسم صادقا، لئن تركتني ناطقا لأضجن إليك بين أهل ضجيج العاملين، ولأصرخن إليك صراخ المستصرخين، ولأبكين عليك بكاء الفاقدين، ولأنادينك أين كنت يا ولي المؤمنين، يا غاية آمال العارفين، يا غياث المستغيثين. Raise your hands together. يا غياث المستغيثين. Recite this together. يا غياث المستغيثين، يا حبيب قلوب الصادقين، ويا إله العالمين. أفتراك سبحانك يا إلهي وبحمدك تسمع فيها صوت عبد مسلم سجن فيها بمخالفته وذاق طعم عذابها بمعصيته وحبس بين أطباقها بجرمه وجريرته وهو يضج إليك ضجيج مؤمل لرحمتك ويناديك بلسان أهل توحيدك ويتوسل إليك بربوبيتك يا مولاي. فكيف يبقى في العذاب وهو يرجو ما سلف من حلمك؟ أم كيف تؤلمه النار وهو يأمل فضلك ورحمتك؟ أم كيف يحرقه لهيبها وأنت تسمع صوته وترى مكانه؟ أم كيف يشتمل عليه زفيرها وأنت تعلم ضعفه؟ أم كيف يتقلقل بين أطباقها وأنت تعلم صدقه؟ أم كيف تزجره زبانيتها وهو يناديك يا رب؟ أم كيف يرجو فضلك في عتقه منها فتتركه فيها؟ هيهات، ما ذلك الذن بك ولا المعروف من فضلك ولا مشبه لما عاملت به الموحدين من برك وإحسانك. فباليقين أقطع لولا ما حكمت به من تعذيب جاحديك وقضيت به من إخلاد معانديك لجعلت النار كلها بردا وسلاما وما كان لأحد فيها مقرا ولا مقاما، لكنك تقدست أسماؤك أقسمت أن تملأها من الكافرين من الجنة والناس أجمعين وأن تخلد فيها المعاندين وأنت جل ثناؤك قلت مبتدئا وتطولت بالإنعام متكرما. أفمن كان مؤمنا كمن كان فاسقا لا يستوون. إلهي وسيدي فأسألك بالقدرة التي قدرتها وبالقضية التي حتمتها وحكمتها وغلبت من عليه أجريتها أن تهب لي في هذه الليلة وفي هذه الساعة كل جرم أجرمته وكل ذنب أذنبت وكل قبيح أسررت وكل جهل عملت كتمته أو أعلنت أخفيته أو أظهرت وكل سيئة أمرت بإثباتها الكرام الكاتبين الذين وكلتهم بحفظ ما يكون مني وجعلتهم شهودا علي مع جواره وكنت أنت الرقيب علي من ورائهم والشاهد لما خفي عنهم وبرحمتك أخفيت وبفضلك سترت وأن توفر حظي من كل خير تنزل أو إحسان تفضل أو بر تنشر أو رزق تبسط أو ذنب تغفر أو خطأ تستر. Everyone together. يا ربي يا ربي يا ربي يا ربي يا ربي يا ربي مولاي ومالك رقي، يا من بيده ناصيتي، يا عليما بضري ومسكنتي، يا خبيرا بفقري وفاقتي، يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا ربي يا أسألك بحق قدسك وأعظم صفاتك وأسمائك أن تجعل أوقاتي في الليل والنهار بذكرك معمورة، وبخدمتك موصولة، وأعمالي عندك مقبولة، حتى تكون أعمالي وأورادي كلها وردا واحدا، وحالي في خدمتك سرمدا. يا سيدي يا من عليه معولي، يا من إليه شكوت أحوالي، يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا ربي يا ربي يا on this Thursday night together يا ربي يا ربي يا رب قو على خدمتك يا جوارحي، واشدد على العزيمة جوانحي، وهب لي الجد في خشيتك والدوام في الاتصال بخدمتك، حتى أسرح إليك في ميادين السابقين، وأسرع إليك في المبادرين، وأشتاق إلى قربك في المشتاقين، وأدنو منك دنو المخلصين، وأخافك مخافة الموقنين، وأجتمع في جوارك مع المؤمنين. اللهم ومن أرادني بسوء فأبد، ومن كادني فكد، واجعلني من أحسن عبيدك نصيبا عندك، وأقربهم منزلة منك، وأخصهم زلفة لديك، فإنه لا ينال ذلك إلا بفضلك. وجد لي بجودك، وعطف علي بمجدك، واحفظني برحمتك، واجعل لساني بذكرك لهجا، وقلبي بحبك متيما، ومن علي بحسن إجابتك، وأقل لي عثرتي، واغفر زلتي، فإنك قضيت على عبادك بعبادتك، وأمرتهم بدعائك، وضمنت لهم الإجابة. فإليك يا ربي نصبت وجهي، وإليك يا ربي مددت يدي، فبعزتك استجب لي دعائي، وبلغني مناي، ولا تقطع من فضلك رجائي، واكفني شر الجن والإنس من أعدائي. يا سريع الرضا يا سريع الرضا يا سريع الرضا، اغفر لي من لا يملك إلا الدعاء، فإنك فعال لما تشاء. يا من اسمه دواء، وذكره شفاء وطاعته غنى. ارحم الرأس ماله الرجاء وسلاحه البكاء. يا سابغ النعم يا دافع النقم يا نور المستوحشين في الظلام يا عالما لا يعلم. صل على محمد وآل محمد وافعل بما أنت أهله. وصلى الله على رسوله والأئمة الميامين من آله وسلم تسليما كثيرا. نقرأ سورة مباركة الفاتحة. بسم الله.
Just be having a 5-minute break, and inshallah we'll start the discussion circle in about 5 minutes time at just before 8:25. So what?
Inshallah, one day. So we can again and I'm coming to see you.
Perfect. Thank you.
Never see you again.
Down there.
No tea today.
You can play, man. Come on.
Yes.
I don't know that. All I know is tuna. Yeah, that's it. Alhamdulillah. Tuna was, yeah, that's right. Yeah, no.
It feels pretty perfect. Thank you so much.
Okay.
We'll get started, yeah?
Something you can take a couple more minutes.
I'm sure.
Give it 2 minutes. Let me just check the live stream.
Yeah.
things he points at, and then we'll go to our main point of discussion for tonight. So one angle, he says, look at the human brain, and I think we may have mentioned this last time, that if you were to just touch one tiny part of the human brain with too much pressure, that person can forget everything in their history. And we see community members, unfortunately, going through Alzheimer's, a malfunction of the brain, and such a difficult disease to live with. This brain that if you just see it on the floor just looks like a whole load of goo that a baby could probably prod at and play with and just have fun with, in reality is one of the most complex parts of our body. And if you were to try and get someone to recreate that, good luck. Something gooey, yet so powerful. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran in Surah 51, Al-Dhariyat, verse 20, He says, وَفِي الْأَرْضِ آيَةٌ لِلْمُوقِنِينَ, and on the earth are signs for the certain, i.e. those who are certain in faith. There are signs there for everyone on this earth. And if you have faith, you're going to be able to see them. You're going to be able to appreciate them. Or you're just going to see them like the others and say, oh, it's just by chance this will come about. Allah's saying, look, I've given you signs. If you have faith, you'll appreciate it. And in the next verse, verse 21, وَفِي أَنفُسِكُمْ أَفَلَا تُبْصِرُونَ. Not just that these signs are in the earth, but also in yourselves. Then will you not see? So I've given you signs like the insects, like gravity, like the sun, like the moon, like the solar system working in order, like the ships in the sea managing to stay afloat. But I've also, وَفِي أَنفُسِكُمْ, I've also put signs within you. Your brain, your heart, this call that comes from within. Yet you're still denying me? What more do you want? If someone shows you and writes down 1 + 1 = 2, like, here's the paper, here's the proof, they're like, no, I don't accept it. Okay, what more do you want from me, man? Do you want me to get one cube, put it next to another cube, and then ask you to count how many cubes there are left? How many more signs do you want from me? At some point, the individual has to lower their ego, lower their ignorance, lower their arrogance, and say, you know what, you're right. We also need to lower our ego, lower our arrogance, and say, you know what, Allah, not only did you say it in the Quran that there's signs everywhere, you also told us that there's signs within me. And now actually I've seen them, I'm just going to admit, the same way that Amazon wasn't built by chance, there's no way all of this was built by chance. There must be a creator, and that is you, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ayatollah Nasser then goes on and gives the example of the bat. Really random actually, I wasn't expecting the bat to be mentioned, but anyway. And he speaks about how does a bat go around its day, or night we should say. It flies at night, in the middle of the night, with no eyes, or it's blind if I'm not mistaken. And how does it go? Through sounds that are too high pitched for the human to hear. Allah's created it in this way. And imagine Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam in Nahj al-Balagha gets to a point in his sermon where he's talking about creation. He actually mentions the bat. And he describes it as follows. It's reported to say, it's never prevented from the way because of the darkness of the night. Great and glorious is God who, without a previous model, brought everything into being. Without sketches to copy, Allah has created the bat in the most genius way. He's created your kidney in the most genius way. He's created the plant in the most genius way. It's not like you and I copying it. It's from nowhere. Allah gives us another revelation, another creation. Like, whoa, that's quite smart, that's quite cool, Signs everywhere. Are we the faithful ones that accept them, or do we still turn it away and say it was by chance? And then he talks about the plants, the flowers, and the cycle that the whole animal kingdom and stuff like this goes through. And he specifically focuses on the bee. How the bee goes around creating honey, working with the plants, and all of that good stuff, which, as you know, I'm awful at science, so I don't actually know what happens there, but something to do with pollen and whatever, something like that. The bee sorts it out. So at the end of the day, you have this very skillful creator. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the bee in the Quran as well, Surah An-Nahl, verses 68 and 69. It's like, you know what? Okay, maybe there is a bit too much evidence here for me to now deny. Which of these bounties and favors of your Lord are you going to keep denying? At what point are you just going to admit, I haven't got a better answer? My lazy answer is nature. My lazy answer is, oh, it's just by chance. But the moment someone asks me a question and says, if Amazon was built deliberately and anything else was built deliberately, tell me your theory as to how this came up by accident. You're like, oh yeah, I just haven't got time for that. It's just the Big Bang. Okay, tell me about who created the Big Bang. We don't engage our brains in the same about creation, about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in the same way we engage our brains when it comes to our studies. And I'm not saying forsake your studies for the sake of Allah. I'm saying increase your time on your studies, but increase your time on understanding your Creator. Because guess who created your studies? Guess what you're trying to study? Guess whose art, guess whose creation you're trying to study? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's. Not chances. Studies, sciences. So, all of that concluded, I think the point is very clear. Without order, without a creator who created this order and these rules, khalas, nothing works. It cannot be by chance, and we can continue that debate to a separate point, but for the sake of our discussion, we'll assume that we are all now on the ship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and journeying towards Him. So when we then take a step back and you just appreciate all of these subtleties, it starts to beg the question, honestly, just how much is there in creation? Every time you hear another Sky News report that they've discovered yet another rock in the solar system, or another type of organism, or another type of bird, or a dinosaur, or blah, 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 from whatever. There's always something new coming up. And science is huge, yet that's only just one part of the creation that we see. And at some point, we hold our hands up, and we submit to this creator, and we realize that this creator is beyond the level of intelligence that we're ever going to be able to comprehend. He's beyond wise. And the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes this moment, if you like, or how we could use this ayah as a way to think about this moment is beautiful. Surah number 31, Surah Al-Luqman, verse 27. And this is beautiful. Just reflect on this. That aha moment that you have when you realize Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's greatness. And if whatever trees upon the earth were pens, so if every tree on the earth was a pen, and the sea was its ink, replenished thereafter by 7 more seas, the words of Allah would not be exhausted. Indeed, Allah is exalted in might and wise. You know what, when you have that moment where you just submit and just hold your hands up and say, you know what, Allah, you're on a different level. Let's be honest, you're on a different level. There's no way that I can even recognize the level you're on. You're just on a different level. You know, like Messi and Ronaldo, everyone just gets to a point like, you know what, you guys are just on a different level, fair enough. There's a reason why they didn't go to Chelsea, right? Right? And Watford. But anyway. At some point, just hold your hands up, you're in a different league. You're just in a different league. No one's, appreciate the generation that you have them. I wouldn't say in the same way, but using that same kind of concept. At some point, you just hold your hands up to Allah and say, you know what, Allah, there have been so many creators that have been on this earth, creators of, for example, the plane, the Wright brothers, creators of businesses, like Jeff Bezos and Steve Jobs. But at some point, I recognize your level of creation makes theirs look like nothing. They're trying to reach your creation in Mars. Think about it that way. They're trying to reach your creation. Yet you're telling them that's like part 1 of 1,000. Who's having the joke there? You put Messi 10-0 down. He's like, yeah, no worries, I've still got it. Allah's like, yeah, it's cute, you've got to Mars. Let me know when you're ready for the next bit. Oh, amazing generation, you know? At some point you just realize, even if you were to have every single tree turn into a pen, and the sea turn into ink, you would still need 7 more in order to try and describe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Obviously this is like metaphorical to say it's never going to happen. So we accept that there's a creator who's all powerful, all wise, all knowing, all merciful. We shall accept that therefore there is no other deity that comes into that and we're just focusing on Allah. But as with anything amazing, and as we said in our first session, we as humans are curious. We want to know more. So now we've identified there's this thing called a creator, there's this thing called God, there's this thing called Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And because we're recognizing Allah's greatness, now we're looking at the world through that new set of glasses that we spoke about 2 weeks ago. We're now saying, actually, I want to get to know this amazing thing even more. I'm curious. What is it about you, Allah, that makes you this way? How did you kind of do this? What was your whole point behind doing this? How did you even come into existence? Or did you even come into existence? You just want to know more, right? We're humans, we're inquisitive, we're born that way. You come out of the coma, remember the example, you come out of the coma and you say, where am I? What am I doing? What's my purpose? When something intriguing happens, you want to ask questions. So in the same way, we look at Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and we say, what are you? What attributes do you have? What is it about you? I want to know more. And they say that once you get to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala more, as you increase your ma'rifah and you learn more about Him, you fall even more in love with Him. And we fall even more in love with Allah, you make more time for Him, so you learn more about Him. And because you've learned more about Him, you fall more in love with Him. Because you fall more in love, you spend more time. You spend more time, you study more. You study more, you fall in love more. And it's a never-ending flow. And this is the journey of ma'rifah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's why it's never-ending. So it's one thing to recognize Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through studying creation. We've now discussed this. This is the easier version. But it's another to try and recognize Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through his attributes himself. This is very tricky. This is really tough and needs a lot of focus and a lot of attention. The creation part we've done, or we've spoken about. We can find Allah through the creation. But now we want to go to Allah directly and try and figure Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala out directly. But it's tough. And this is why I'm saying this last session, hopefully is the last session on Tawheed for us as a group for now, but will be the beginning of your personal journey to go and read and engage with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala more so. So this is just an entry point to the next stage, the next dimension. But why is it tough? Why is it that when I say that we now want to go and recognize Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, why is the road not perfect, smooth sailing, and easy for us to get there? It would make sense, you could argue, hey, you've now found the light, it should be easy to get there. Why is it a struggle? This is where your brains need to be really switched on. And this is where I've seen, even amongst friends, they just switch off at this point. Because it's too tough for the average brain to be able to appreciate. So, if you can, just stay with me for these next few points. And either you're with it, and if not, please put your hand up and we'll repeat this. And we'll keep going. I don't care if we don't get to the rest of the content. This point is critical. Why is it so tough for us to recognize, to understand the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Simply put, because none of Allah's attributes resemble what we see or what we hear. None of Allah's attributes resemble what we see, what we hear, what we taste, what we feel. It's nothing like our five senses, what our five senses have been interacting with for the entirety of our life. The very first condition for identifying the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the negation of any of the characteristics that can be associated with this world. Genuinely, hands up if you're with me. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Any halves? Shall I repeat this point? Okay, cool. We're finding it tricky to recognize Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We're claiming it's tricky to understand and recognize Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We're now saying why. If I were to take this glass of water and say, if you put your finger in this, what would it feel like? You'd be, oh, it'd be wet. How do you know what wet is? Well, one day, your mum told you to jump into the pool, and you're like, oh, this is wet, right? You recognize this is a concept, wet. You recognize that was the concept, cold. When you ate spicy food, you're like, oh, that is the concept of spicy. Good Lord, I'm not doing this again, right? If someone punches you, you recognize this is pain. I get it, this is pain. These are all things that our senses have picked up before. So if I were to say, oh, you're going to meet Sadiq one day, he's loud, you'd be like, oh, I've heard a loud person before, right? It makes sense. We've interacted with it with our five senses. When it comes to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what makes it so difficult for us to appreciate and identify his attributes is that they are outside the realm of our creation. He's in a completely different, and even this sentence is wrong, but it's a symbol of what we're trying to say. He's outside of this domain. He's beyond these boundaries. Does that make more sense? Yeah? So this presents a massive dilemma. Because we're told, go and increase your ma'rifah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Go get closer to Allah. To get closer, you need to increase your ma'rifah. You need to fall in love, you get closer, and it's that constant circle. So we start our journey, and the first moment, I come along and tell you, it's really difficult, good luck. That's not very loving, is it? Right? If you to see it that way. So it presents a dilemma, like how are we going to do this? Because we've lived our entire life within this natural world, and everything that we've interacted with or spoken about has been a measurement in reference to something else we've experienced, touched, smelt, seen, whatever. Now why? Because once we appreciate the why, at some point, and this is what I'm saying, some of my friends just like stop and they give up. And honestly, you can see the limitation of their journey towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in that moment. You can really see a difference. Those who manage to conquer this barrier and jump over, in many times where we've said calamity falls upon someone and you see those individuals, they're just able to be so chill. مَا رَأَيْتُ إِلَّا جَمِيلًا. Because Zainab alayhi salam sees the infinite. She doesn't see something finite.
She's okay with the concept of something infinite. Something with infinite love and mercy. She's okay with that concept. But for someone who's not managed to jump that fence to recognize there's something outside of this domain that is so great, if you can't do that, you're always going to be a little bit at tension with Allah, because that is the very nature of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, let's try and understand the why. If we appreciate the why, then maybe we'll be able to go, you know what, I just accept. Like I submit and I accept. That is the complexity and greatness and grandeur of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's why we say Allahu Akbar. Our reference points are all limited. It's all matter. Matter's made up of substance, of sort. It's all got properties. And all the creatures that we've interacted with have all been within given parameters, within time, within a given place. We struggle even in our heads. If I were to say to you, Akhirah is forevermore. If I'd say something's going to last for a long time, usually to try and rationalize that, we're like, okay, well, maybe am I halfway through? Am I a quarter of the way through? Oh, the Arkan's quite long. Are we halfway through? Are we third of the way through? We try and reference against an end point. The journey to Manchester, we're going to Manchester this weekend for a majalis. So I know my wife at some point is going to say, how long left, right? I was like, we're halfway there. There's always a reference point. With Allah, there is no reference point in time or place, because He's beyond that. But because everything we interacted with has been within the parameter of time and space, we panic at that thought until we accept it. So it's tough, therefore, to visualize a Lord, a God, a Creator, something that lacks any substance, that doesn't live in time or space, yet has control over every single aspect and dimension of this creation that we've come to begin to appreciate. Hence, we need to be cautious in the way we discuss Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Very, very careful in our wording. And may Allah forgive us if we make this mistake, but we're trying to be noble in our intentions. So we need to become okay with accepting that in the same way you can't pour an entire ocean into this glass, the same way we can't let our heart or brain fully comprehend the greatness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It just won't work. We're limited, and He is not. The ocean, if we use the metaphor, is unlimited, but the glass is not. We need to be okay with this concept. And once you manage to jump that fence, it makes such a difference in the way you see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. One small error on this path, however, and it's tiny, one small error, if you're unable to articulate that Allah is infinite, all of a sudden He becomes finite. And when He becomes finite, you're on the journey towards atheism or polytheism. The line is very subtle. That's what I'm saying. This session today, we're drawing a fence, and we're saying in the last 6 weeks, maybe we've been here, where when we spoke about in the first few sessions, if I try to put this glass on here, it's going to wobble because the foundation is weak, like this. But if I manage to invest in this foundation, then I can jump over this fence, and all this other noise that comes around, like atheism and nature and whatever, is not going to shake me. Well, it's less likely to shake me, right? So today we're trying to jump over this fence. It's probably the most intellectually tricky one that we've had to explain, because I can't use my stupid analogies like I usually like to do, right? Because it's a very delicate subject. So we shouldn't go near to the danger of trying to compare Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with, for example, creation. Our understanding needs to be greater than that. Yes, we're painting very basic metaphors and similes here for our understanding initially, but once we jump the fence, we're in the realm of Allah is infinite, Allahu Akbar. I don't refer to Him to anything else. And today we want to make that jump, if we can. So if we were to try and describe, therefore, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is how we could go about describing Him. And we'll do this through the words of Amir al-Mu'mineen towards the end, inshallah. God's being is infinite in all aspects, and at the same time possesses supreme perfection. So everything about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is infinite, and every single thing of Allah is supreme perfection. Now, that's an incorrect statement. We're trying our best here, but it's an incorrect statement. By saying it's supreme perfection, we already now have a reference point of what supreme perfection could look like, because we've been able to describe it. We said Allah is infinite. So by saying supreme perfection, it sounds like there's an end, like perfect is an end. This in itself is wrong, because Allah is infinitely perfect. But you see how difficult it is to describe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with the tongue. And Amir al-Mu'mineen will testify to this shortly. God's essence suffers from no defects from whatever perspective. So we're seeing eternal, supreme perfection, no defects at all. That's kind of like the general principles that we're now learning about this creator that created this order that we've now in the last 4 or 5 weeks submitted to and said there has to be some sort of order in everything that we've seen. That call that came from within that we discussed a few weeks ago, I'm now recognizing what that was and I'm trying to understand how great that thing is. So is there a way, therefore, that we're able to articulate and verbalize God's attributes in a correct manner? And as I said, this is where we'll allude to the words of the commander of the faithful, Mawla, and sometimes we have these amazing titles that are given from the minbar where we don't take a moment to recognize them. Mawla al-Muwahideen, the master of the Muwahideen. Muwahideen, so if you add a meme at the beginning of set of words in Arabic, usually it personifies that person, right? Or it gives it some kind of personality. Muwahideen, those who establish, or those who are of Tawheed. Muwahideen coming from Tawheed, Wahda being the root there, Wahda. This is the master of those who profess Tawheed. That is Amir al-Mu'mineen. Do you appreciate that? Yes, he is Haydar. Yes, he's Karrar. Yes, he's Waliullah, etc., etc. But when you break down these titles, what it is about Ahl Muhammad is that they are Muwahideen. They are ones who completely acknowledge and submit to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala being Ahad, as we say in Surah Al-Ikhlas. قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ. Not Wahid, not one. Ahad, it's different. I can't even explain it. It's a singular thing, if you like. So, from the words of the master of the Muwahideen, Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. And a second salawat in honor of his teacher and guide, Nabi al-A'zam Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. Nahj al-Balagha. One of my teachers, he said, you have the Quran, and with the Quran you have 2 wings. Sahif al-Sajjadiyya on one side, and Nahj al-Balagha on the other. When was the last time we picked up Nahj al-Balagha? Or even Sahifa, and studied it? Amir al-Mu'mineen in the first sermon, so we're talking the very first page of Nahj al-Balagha, begins by describing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I was going to use Ayatul al-Nasir's text that he has in the book, in the lecture, but I was like, you know what, actually, and whilst it's an amazing description, I'm sure he wouldn't mind me as well referring to Nahj al-Balagha, but there is that part of Ayatul al-Nasir that he puts there, and he has a poem about Allah, and it's beautiful, but I thought let's if we can, use the words of Amir al-Mu'mineen. Now, this hopefully could be the conclusion for you as individuals on your journey towards Allah, with that fence from going here where we've begun to appreciate Allah and realize His greatness, to now jumping that fence to going, you know what, Allah is infinite. And I can't stress how much that if we manage that jump today or in our life, it's a game changer. It's a life changer. Not just for you, for your family, for your community. You don't run out of energy anymore. You don't run out of patience anymore. You don't run out of mercy or love. You don't worry about risk, about sustenance, about money. You don't worry about anything once you jump into that court. Because you recognize the infinite one. Do I want him sorting out all my affairs, or do I want me, the finite one, sorting out all my affairs? Once you recognize this greatness, you're like, I'm safe. No matter what happens, I'm safe. So this jump is massive. To do this jump, we try and appreciate Allah to be infinite. How does Amir al-Mu'mineen describe? Pay attention to every single word. Praise is due to Allah, whose worth cannot be described by speakers. You may have already got it, right? You think Amir al-Mu'mineen is going to come out saying he's merciful, he's loving, he's kind. It's just the first thing Amir al-Mu'mineen says in Nahj al-Balagha, one of the wings on either side of the Quran, according to my teacher. One of the most critical books for us to understand from the one who truly understands Tawheed. His first sentence when describing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not He is. No, it's whose worth cannot be described by speakers. Already alluding now to His infinite nature. Whose bounties cannot be counted by counters. And whose claim to obedience cannot be satisfied by those who attempt to do so. He whom the heights of intellectual courage cannot appreciate, and the divings of understanding cannot reach. He for whose description no limit has been laid down. No eulogy exists, like no praises, like poems, whatever exists. No time is ordained, and no duration is fixed. He brought forth creation from His omnipotence, dispersed winds through His compassion, and made firm the shaking earth with rocks. Honestly, when you think, how would you describe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? When your friends maybe say to you at work, or when you ask yourself, if your child says to you one day, how would you describe Allah? Would come out, He's really loving, He's really merciful, He's great. You know what means, like, please don't try. Please don't try. He is infinite. He's beyond the realm of our understanding. And instead of trying to describe Him, accept and submit to the thing that you can't even describe. Just bow your head to it. Just recognize Allahu Akbar. There is nothing in your league, Allah. There is no league without you, put it that way. You have to use this kind of terminology where you negate any existence were it not for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because He is the principal cause of everything. Amir al-Mu'mineen goes on in his second paragraph now to describe a little bit more, but less about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but more about our interaction. The foremost in religion, so the central point of faith, is the acknowledgement of Him. The foremost in religion is the acknowledgement of Him. Now I'm going to say something that's going to upset some people. That may mean I never get to come back here, depending on who's present and if it gets out or whatever. But I'm going to say something because this is from the words of Amir al-Mu'mineen, or this is from the teacher of Amir al-Mu'mineen. The foremost in religion is the acknowledgement of Him, of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How much time have we as a community invested in Tawheed? If you were to put the hours on our fingers on how much time we've invested in the Azza of Imam Hussaini Islamic, and may that never, ever die, and may that only ever increase. But how much time have we invested in transferring that energy and revival into Tawheed of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Or have we always sat here listening to Fada'il over and over and over and over and over again? And inshallah, this centre is not from among that group. But we have to ask ourselves genuinely, do I spend more time investing in everything in this faith but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? When Amir al-Mu'mineen says the foremost in religion is the acknowledgement of Him. I will be the first to say, do Azza on Ashura night as long as you can. But if you don't leave time to recognize Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then the very person you are commemorating, Al-Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam, who in Dua Arafah spends 30, 40 minutes with his hands in the air professing the oneness of Allah. What's the point? And this is on my shoulders if it's wrong, I go as far as saying, if we as a community truly understood Tawheed and truly preached Tawheed and the Adalah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and all of the usul, genuinely, if we all did it perfectly, but we didn't mention Imam al-Hussain in the process, would we be in a better situation that way with our Imam when he comes back to see us? Or if we say to him, we never understood Tawheed, but we understood you, he'll say, if you didn't understand Allah, then you didn't understand what I was fighting for in the first place, so you didn't understand me. That would be my guess of it. Yes, call to Hussain, but recognize Hussain is Da'i Allah. Yes, call to Hussain, but in Ziyarat Ashura, we don't start with Assalamu alayka ya Imam Hussain. We don't start with Assalamu alayka ya Sayyidina Hussain. They're all very respectful. We start with Assalamu alayka ya, in Ziyarat Ashura, what do we start with? Assalamu alayka ya, what do we say? Aba Abdullah. Peace be upon you, O father, or if you like, teacher of the abds of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Our teacher told us, what's the difference between abd and abid? A abid, you can say, is a servant. A servant is someone who comes to your house, helps you clean for 2-3 hours, for example, and then leaves. You ask them who they are, they'll say, yeah, my name is Jane and I'm a cleaner. You ask a slave, what is your name? The slave is known by their owner. You ask an abd of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who are you? They don't say, my name is Hussain. They say, Allah is my Lord. Because I'm owned, I'm a slave, I'm owned by my owner. Everything in Ziyarat Ashura points towards Tawheed. Everything in Dua Arafah points towards Tawheed. Everything in our faith points towards Tawheed. They are all Da'i Allah. The foremost in religion is the acknowledgement of Him, Amir al-Mu'mineen. So how much time have we invested as fathers, mothers, children, community members, brothers, sisters, in professing the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Let's go a bit further. The perfection of acknowledging Him is to testify Him. The perfection of testifying Him is to believe in His oneness. The perfection of believing in His oneness is to regard Him as pure. And the perfection of His purity is to deny Him attributes. Because every attribute is a proof that is different from that to which it is attributed. And everything to which something is attributed is different from the attribute. Do you see the way Amir al-Mu'mineen is using these words? He's so careful with how he describes Allah. Don't attribute anything to Him, because that means you're attributing Him to something that it's been attributed to. If you say that I'm loud, it means you've attributed me to noise, or to a person who is loud. Therefore, you've limited me, which for me is fine. For Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if you say He's generous in reference to who? No, Allah is unlimited. In the space of something that is unlimited, there is no space for something else. Now, this is a very philosophical point. If this lands, then I think we're definitely over the fence. And I'll do my best to explain this. The question comes about, how do we prove that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is unlimited? Why can't you have two? Let's say you have a given space, and already we've caused a limit, but let's just, for our simple brains, let's say you have a space. And if I say there's one person in there and they own all of that space, you would say, yeah, that makes sense. There's one person, they own all of that space. If I say let's put another person in that space and they need to share it, well, let's say, for example, I put two people there and I say, okay, between the two of you, you need to do something with this space. Naturally, one is going to own some of it, the other is going to own the rest of it. The moment you create two, there is not space for one to have everything. So the moment that you acknowledge that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is infinite, is once you've recognized that everything else, or the prerequisite to that is that you have to recognize that nothing else exists. You wipe the slate clean of everything, and then you establish the one that is there. And look at how we say in our kalima. We don't say, I bear witness that there is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We say, I bear witness, ashhadu an la ilaha, that there is no deity illa Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In order to establish Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in your heart, in your understanding, you first need to wipe clean of every other deity that could have been there. Then you can establish Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because there is no space for Allah in a space, even though we don't believe He's in a space, if you like. But there is no space for Allah in a space that already has something existing. So if your ego is still there, get rid of it. Otherwise you can't establish Tawheed. If you have another belief that you think this God could exist, there's no space for that until Allah. You have to get rid of that until Allah is there. Even if in your heart of hearts you're still niggling, saying, I still think there's something called nature, you have to rid of that and recognize Allah is the creator of that nature. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is how you recognize Allah as being infinite. That is how you connect to this infinite being. And if you're slammed to the floor 100 times in Karbala, you still know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is looking after you. I lose 10k, yeah, it doesn't matter. Allah al-Razaq, like what am I going to worry about? He has all the risk. Just a little bit more from Amir al-Mu'mineen. Thus, whoever attaches attributes to Allah recognizes His like. Exactly as we just said, if you put an attribute, now you're associating. Thus, whoever attaches attributes to Allah recognizes His like. And whoever recognizes His like regards Him as two. And whoever regards Him as two recognizes parts for Him. And whoever recognizes parts for Him mistook Him. And whoever mistook Him pointed at Him. And whoever pointed at Him admitted limitations for Him. And whoever admitted limitations for Him numbered Him. Whoever said, "In what is He?" held that He is contained. And whoever said, "On what is He?" held He is not something else. So you know how we're saying if we put everyone into a space, and obviously we can't do that because we're now limiting Allah to a certain space. This is what Amir al-Mu'mineen is telling us. Don't try and put Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a dimension of time or space. Acknowledge that our minds are so smart, yet they're so fickle that we can't recognize outside of time and space because that's all we've ever known. But recognize there is a concept of time and space that doesn't exist for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because He created time and space. Once you jump that fence, the greatness of Allah is incredible. And just finally from Amir al-Mu'mineen, He is a being, but not through phenomenon of coming into being. Lam yalid wa lam yulad. He exists, but not from non-existence. He is with everything, but not in physical nearness. He is different from everything, but not in physical separation. He acts, but without connotation of movements or instruments. He sees, even when there is none to be looked at from among His creation. Wow. He is only one, such that there is none with whom He may keep company or whom He may miss in His absence. Now you see when Ayatul Nasr was telling us, be careful the way you speak about Allah. Because once you associate Him with something with creation, you've limited Him already. You've attached Him in reference to. So when the Mufassirin talk about, tell me what does Allahu Akbar mean? Many of us will say, Allah is great. When we've described Allah as great, you're putting that in reference against something else that is great. Oh no, but I said Allah is greater. Okay, greater means it's better than something. In Arabic you have afdal min, you have to say better than something. Even in English, right? This is better than. You have to now fill in the than, otherwise it doesn't make sense. Okay, Allah is the greatest. Okay, but if I'm the greatest in football, there's someone who's less great than me. So if you say Allah is greatest, you've given a scale. You've given a leaderboard. Allah came top. No, Allah created all of this. He is can't even say above all of that, but now hopefully you're getting the point. Allah is beyond. Allah is limitless. And the best description of Tawheed that we see, or not the best, one incredible description of Tawheed that we see in the Quran is from the Surah At-Tawheed. قُلْ بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ اللَّهُ الصَّمَدُ لَمْ يَلِدْ وَلَمْ يُولَدْ وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدٌ. And what's beautiful, and inshallah we'll end on this point, is that when people talk about how do you do something sincerely, for example, how do you come and give a lecture sincerely? How do I serve the community sincerely? How do I serve by cooking the food or opening the center or putting an Instagram post up about Allah? How do I do this sincerely? How do I not do it for my nafs? There's a surah in the Quran. What is the Arabic for sincerity? Does anyone know? Or sincere? Ikhlas. Do we have a surah called Ikhlas? What is Surah Al-Ikhlas also known as? Surah Tawheed. Oh wow. Look at the beauty of this. In order to be sincere, in order to have khulus, you need to understand Tawheed. Why? Because if you want to be sincere, if you want to do something qurbatan in Allah Ta'ala, you need to recognize that this Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, what is He about? The more sincere I get, or the more sincere I want to get, the more I need to understand the Creator. The more I understand the Creator, the more I just bow my head and say, what an amazing being you are and I'm nothing. The more sincere I become. The more I do that, the more I realize how feeble I am and how great He is. And the cycle keeps on going. There are two wings for someone to become a muwahhid. Is it not a surprise, therefore, that if we were to speak about the most sincere individuals on the earth, the Holy Prophet and the Holy Household, their understanding of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was as good as it gets amongst creation. Not perfect. Not perfect. Because perfect would imply they knew everything about Allah. It's an infinite journey. We always ask in our salah for their understanding to get greater. وَارْفَعْ دَرَجَةً. You have an extra layer, an extra station, Ya Rasulullah, in your knowledge. They're the most sincere because they were the masters of muwahid, of tawheed, sorry. They were muwahideen. So I really hope, really hope that inshallah in these sessions, and I think are we out of time, I think? 10 past 9, yeah? You say we have time or that's...
We have time.
Yeah?
We can do the questions as well.
Okay. Let me finish on the summary and then inshallah have some time. So I hope just during these 5 sessions on Tawheed, we've scratched a very basic surface that has ignited a passion in you to say, I want to know more. I really want to know more. And if so, my recommendation is that you pick up the book Principles of Faith by Ayatollah Wahid Khurasani. I've mentioned him in the past. He's about 100 years old now, one of the top ulama in the world at the moment. He studied alongside Sayyid al-Sistani under Sayyid al-Khouy, and they were both known to be the top 2 students of Sayyid al-Khouy's group. Incredible man, absolutely in love with Lady Fatima az-Zahra alayhi salam, such that at the age of 100, whether he does it this year, we'll see, but it wouldn't surprise me, he takes out a mawkib, like a procession in Qom, for 2 shahadats. One for the shahada of Lady Zahra, and one for the shahada of Imam Sadiq alayhi salam. On his walking, by the way, aged 100. And if not, last year he was born 98, 99. Incredible mind. He has a book called Principles of Faith, translated by Sayyid Ali Raza Rizvi, who I'm sure all of you know from Majlis al-Ulama. It's available online. You just type in Wahid Khurasani Principles of Faith PDF and read that. That for me is the next book after Ayatollah Nasser's book. So I really hope that we've jumped into this infinite journey, if you like, towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's, I guess, what we wanted to try and start. There's so many more slides here that I was going to go through, but inshallah we'll leave it for now. But I'll end with this, Surah number 42, verse number 11, Surah Ash-Shura. لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٌ. There is nothing like him. That is the only description that we can, I guess, give, that the Quran gives us. لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٌ. That's all that we can say about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلي يا ربي على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد. Were there any questions that came through online from before?
We do have questions.
Yeah.
So
If there's time, or even if there's questions from anyone or comments, if there's not a question today, I'll be panicked because this is the most difficult concept to explain and it's so complicated. So I really hope there's something that comes back in China.
When you say that we cannot attach any attributes to God Almighty, but then we talk about the 99 names of Allah.
Mm-hmm.
How do those 2 things relate?
It's a really nice question. I think even when we think about those, they are names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so they are ascribed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to himself as a way for us to recognize and have some kind of cognition of what merits he may have. But we also recognize this is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at the end of the day. It's a very Mickey Mouse answer, deliberately. What we're trying to say here is they are signals towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if you like. At the end of the day, after all those 99, you end up with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at the end of it, which is infinite. But they're just ways for us to appreciate something of Allah, but they're by no means the end, if that makes sense. So if we were to try and describe Allah as merciful, Ar-Rahman, what scale is he on? And we can't even do that. So we don't understand the true level of Ar-Rahman. We don't get it. We always say, and I've used the example, think about the mercy of a mother. That's what we try and rationalize. This mercy of the mother is so great towards their child. Allah's greater than that, but it's an incorrect comparison. So it's just a way, I guess, for us to point towards Allah to kind of recognize his traits, but by no means are we saying that is him, if you like, because the scale then starts and whatever. But these are amazing signals for us to get towards him, that he said, call me through these perfect names that I have. And inshallah, in his wisdom, there's reasons to why that's the case. Did you have something? Go.
Your previous lectures, you said that if we have an inner monotheist that calls us towards Allah, which everyone experiences one way or another, why do you, in your opinion, believe people revert back to their old ways of pride, arrogance, or idol worshipping?
I'm glad you said in my opinion, because now I can say many wrong things. Even that response was my own opinion, by the way, so that's why, many disclaimers, and if it's wrong, please call me out on it. What we usually see from our scholars is that they tell us that this principle of ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, right, so that we have to wipe clean of everything. The first example I didn't say was another god. The first example I said was arrogance. So we have to wipe clean even of our own arrogance before we can establish, we have to wipe clean of everything before anything this comes. So to your point, once someone feels that, what could potentially then drown them away from recognizing Allah again? Arrogance. And in fact, we said it last week, I think, or 2 weeks ago. The ayah ends with yushrikun. They associate partners. Do you remember the line where we said that you go out to sail on the ships, then Allah brings you back to the shore, and instead of thanking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, yushrikun, they start to associate partners. They say, it was the lifeguard that got us here. It was something else that got us here. It's all of this lack of admission within, this arrogance to think there is something else than Allah that got us here, when Allah is the principal cause of it. So usually it comes down to something like that from my personal experience. And it's certainly a journey that we go like this on, yeah? Hopefully we have a positive trajectory, but naturally we go up and down. We're not perfect in that journey. And we have to think in that moment, maybe this very lecture, if someone says, Sadiq, what a great lecture, that can now make me do a drop, because I start to think of myself greater than what I thought before. Therefore, I'm limiting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala again, because on the scale, I'm nothing. So you can see even these subtle things of our way of thinking about ourselves and our faculties that can cause us to not understand Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as well as we were able to before. Does that make sense? Go for it.
So say we have a bad outcome, so like fail an exam, have a driving accident or something like that. Are we justified in wanting to know the reason why Allah has planned for this outcome to happen? Or is there a way for us to sort of figure out what his plan is? Which I know it's not possible, but is it justified?
This is a massive question. This is the whole question of free will, predestination, and stuff like this, right? Which we cannot answer in a few minutes, and I'm just trying to think if there's a lecture I can point you towards that discusses this in good depth. Message me on that one, and I will come back to you. I don't even want to start talking about it because I have to start correcting everything that I say as we go. It's a beautiful question. So the concept of predestination, free will, did Allah, for example, plan this car crash? Did he not? What's going on? Does Allah plan bad things for me? It's a huge discussion. I don't even want to try and go into it. So just message me and I'll try and find you the lecture I'm thinking about that will hopefully explain all the book.
I think the main point with that question was, are we justified in trying to find that plan? Or is it something we just sit back and go, okay, what has happened? As in, do we have a place where we can say, or where we can question, to what level can we question why did something happen?
I'm going to point to facts in history so that we can learn from them rather than try and theoretically answer them. Because if we open it up, we're going to have to set a lot of these philosophical questions. What usually happens is that Hyde Park Corner style, for those of you who are not Hyde Park, what's it called? Speaker's Corner, right? You'll always see someone ask the question and that's it. They start debating on that very point, which is a very daft thing to do. What philosophers usually do is that take many steps back. They go back to first principles and they establish those and then they build from there, and eventually 10 hours into the discussion you reach the question that the person asked and then you see it through a different lens. So I'm not going to go down that road. What I will say in immediate response is look towards historical points, right? So look towards people who have faced extremely difficult situations and see if they have ever asked Allah, why did you put me in this situation? What was the whole point? And my reference point always, and I've mentioned it probably 10, 15 times now, is Lady Zainab alayhi salam. She, out of anyone, and I'm sure you could argue the Holy Prophet, Lady Fatima, especially when we talk about her patience and what she had to go through. You don't see Lady Zainab alayhi salam, from what I have seen, or from what our scholars have told us anyway, complain about the situation or lament to Allah about why did you put me in this situation. Yes, she cries about what has happened, but she doesn't question the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. She says, "Ma ra'aytu illa jamila." I see nothing but beauty in that moment. So just from there, I'm just pointing to historical moments.
Does that mean, for example, that we shouldn't question? We're not going to go into that for now. But what I would say is that a beautiful response from Lady Zainab alayhi salam is this, where she accepts what is happening because she's seeing wisdom. You know, you gave the example of a car accident, right? Failed exam, someone's got cancer, and may Allah protect all of us. You always see winners and losers in those moments. When that kind of news emerges, you always see winners. And when we talk winners and losers, I'm talking spiritual winners and losers, right? When we say winning, we say getting closer to Allah, and when we say losing, we say getting away from Allah. In any adversity, you always see some people who get closer to Allah, and others who reject Allah. They kind of usually go in one of two directions. So I think in these moments, and there's a beautiful thing from Shahid al-Thani, one of our classical scholars, he talks about there's three types of patience, and I'm going to really over-summarize this. So you can see I'm deliberately digressing, but hopefully I'll put a point together. He talks about three types of patience. The first patience, and he speaks about it in the context of someone who's passed away, like a family member. There's three types of patience. The first is the type of patience that you put on because you want everyone in the community to recognize you're not being impatient. So someone comes to you and says, Sadiq, I'm so sorry for your loss, be patient. You're like, okay, I'm not going to go around the mosque screaming my head off and shouting at everyone because you know what, I should be patient because the people think I should be patient. It's still noble to some extent, right? It's very tough, but that's the first level. The second level is the level of patience that you recognize that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to reward you for your patience, which sounds beautiful. But then there's even a third level. The third level of patience, paraphrasing, is that you recognize this situation as an opportunity from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to get closer to Him. And that's why you're remaining patient. Because you want qurbatan ila Allah. You're not doing it for the fame or the public acceptance. You're not doing it for the reward. You're doing it because getting closer to Allah through this moment is absolutely worth it. If you give me any situation, I want to get closer to Allah. And it's very similar to the hadith from Amir al-Mu'mineen where he talks about worshipping Allah. Again paraphrasing, he doesn't do it because he's out of fear or for reward. He does it because Allah's worth it. So again, I know I'm not answering the question on should we, how does it come about, is it predestined, whatever. But what I would say is let that be the theoretical discussion, philosophical discussion to be had one day. But in the midst of it, if we have these moments when we're going home or whatever, tap into every moment that I experience, I can get closer to Allah. Whether it was my doing because I drove 100 miles per hour into a tree, or whether it was someone that hit me, the outcome was the same. There was an accident and I've got a choice, otherwise either I get closer to Allah or get away. Whether it was planned or your fault, whatever, that's the theoretical discussion. But for now we just focus on does that type a few things? Inshallah. But remind me to send that link. I'm going to see if I can find it for you. It's a big conversation. It's a big atheist challenge to the faith as well, about determinism as well. It's a big thing. We good? Inshallah.
I have a question. It's not on the same topic we were just discussing, but if somebody asks you where is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what is the answer?
And this comes back to the philosophical thing. You have to go back and challenge the question. So sometimes people will pose questions that are wrong in their own right. What do I mean by that? If I were to say, we're watching Watford play Man United, 4-1, the brother's not here, he was here last time, anyway. Right? Let's say we're watching Watford United, and I said to you, how many wickets have fallen? The question is wrong, because there's no wickets in football. How many goals have you scored if we're watching Pakistan England? There's no goals in cricket. So the same way, if someone says, where is Allah? The question is wrong. The subject matter that you are discussing has qualities or attributes. So as we've seen with the Amir al-Mu'mineen, is, we have to be careful how we describe it. So if someone says, where is it? So your question's wrong. We have to go back to first principles to establish what is Allah. How do we find Allah? Once we've found Allah, why is it that He is begotten or begot, etc., 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 and then they'll realise this is a weird question for me to ask. So usually it comes down to a misunderstanding of the concept in the first place, at first principles. That make sense?
Yeah.
Inshallah, with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's tawfiq, the plan is next week we continue and we now go to the second usul, which is adala, the justice of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So inshallah we'll see you then. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you, Brother Sadiq, for another informative session. Inshallah, again, we'll have another session next week on Thursday, 23rd of December. But now we'll have a ziyarat by Abbas Dimani. Salawat.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم سلام على آل ياسين السلام عليك يا داعي الله ورباني آياته السلام عليك يا باب الله وديان دينه السلام عليك يا خليفة الله وناصر حقه السلام عليك